Okay, this is part two of how to write an essay. So I've got my notes here. So I'm sure there have been times when you've had a good idea, right? And then you think, nah, it's not going to work, or I could try it, but the odds are against me, or people are not going to support me. And you can come up with all sorts of good reasons why you shouldn't do it or why it's not going to work in the first place. So you give up and you don't even try. This is often a waste because you can think that you wouldn't have had the idea in the first place if you weren't supposed to do something with it. But this negativity or seeing the flaws can actually be a good thing if it helps you to see what's weak and then you figure out how to make it stronger. Or if you don't let it stop you doing something worthwhile or doing something good. And the thing is, this happens because there's a part of the brain that's really good at coming up with ideas, right? It's creative, but it's terrible at being logical. So if you try to create and be logical at the same time or one immediately after the other, you get into trouble. And you kind of damage yourself. And at the same time, the logical part, the part that can see flaws or understand what's not right or what's going to fail, it's terrible at coming up with ideas in the first place. But we've got these two sides of the brain, right and left hemisphere, if you want to think of it that way. So what we want to do is make use of both of them, but not at the same time. Keep them separate. And this is the method that I'm going to show you about how you can apply both sides of the brain to creating or to create a clear picture in your mind, which means that when you come to write, it's going to be good writing. When you write an essay, it's going to be a good essay because you're describing a clear picture that you've figured out for yourself. And that's why it works. That's why it's a good essay. Okay, so I'm saying keep these two sides of the brain separate. So when you're being creative, be creative. Don't think, I'd like to do this, but it's not going to work. Because but it's not going to work, is being critical or critiquing. And that's not being creative. So when you're being creative, just be creative. Come up with ideas, as many as you can, because with the creative side, you want quantity, right? You want 10, 20, 30 possibilities of what you might say or what you might do or how you might handle a situation. And if it's outrageous, you don't say, no, that's outrageous, that'll never work, because that's being analytical and critiquing. And you don't do that at the same time as you're being creative. So then the next day, you leave it for a bit just to change the atmosphere, to change you. And then the next day or later, you come back to it and you just act using the critical part of the brain, of the mind. So you look at the possibilities and you think, okay, is that a good idea? Will it work? Can I prove it? Do I have enough evidence? Will people accept it? What I need to say so that they will accept it? And so on. So you're being critical, critiquing, seeing and analysing the strengths and weaknesses of each possibility. And maybe rejecting some of the ideas because they don't fit or they're too weak or they don't do your argument much good. And if you remember part one, remember the punchline of the joke, remember the conclusion of the essay. If the idea you come up with doesn't really fit the conclusion you want to prove, get rid of it. And that's what the critique part is good for. So you end up with strong, good arguments, well proved, backed up, and so on. So you end up with a stronger piece of writing. Okay, so here's the method. And often with an essay or with a piece of writing, we've done the research, we've made notes, we've got too much to include in the essay. So what we try to do is we take a bit here and a bit there and a bit there, and we try to cobble it all together and mix it up and join it all up into some great essay. And it usually doesn't work. And if it does work, it's not very good, I think. And if that's been your experience, do this, try this. Take your notes, reread your notes if you want, but take your notes and set them aside. And then trust yourself and trust that your mind has got enough grasp of the answer that it's going to give you a good outline, or it's going to give you good ideas on what you might talk about. So start with, give yourself 60 seconds, 2 minutes maximum. And what you do is you write down the points that you might end up making in the essay. So, and all you do is you write a key word or two that's going to remind you of what you were thinking. You don't need to write sentences or paragraphs. You want a word or two. That bit before, I looked at the notes and I wrote down "don't cobble," right, which is my shorthand for don't try and take huge amounts of information, chunks of here, chunks from there, that paragraph, this sentence, that quote, and try and cobble it all together, try and turn it into something manageable. So by saying don't cobble, it reminded me to mention you're better off trusting yourself and making a few key words, or writing down a few key words that will remind you of the whole idea that you want to discuss or develop or talk about in the body of the essay or in the conclusion or in the introduction. So, but you want 60 seconds, 2 minutes maximum. You're not going to spend a lot of time. And the thing is, at the end of, let's say, 2 minutes, you've got, let's say, 10 points that you might talk about. You've done a lot of good work for the day. Right, so that's step one and it's done. So you put it aside, you forget about it until tomorrow. So later you come back to it. And the next day, ideally the next day, you're going to be critical. You're going to critique. So you're going to take each point that you wrote and you're going to look at it and you're going to harass it and you're going to make it justify its existence. So, is it a good point? Do you want to include it in the essay? Does it do anything for your argument? Is it silly? Is it too ridiculous? How can you prove it? Is it a generally accepted thing that people will agree with? Or do you have to bring in special proof or particular quotes from famous people to prove the truth of what it is that you're trying to say? So that's the critique part. And at this point, you want quality, right? With being creative, you're going for quantity, but with critiquing and analysis, you want quality. So you're looking at each point and turning it into the strongest and the best that it can be, whatever that happens to be. And this is the importance of the need for you to write something and rewrite it and look at it again and see where it's weak and critique it and make it stronger, make it better. And then leave it and maybe come back to it a third time. Because it's all about developing a clear picture in your mind of what you want to say and deciding on the best order in which to say it. And it can be that two people have got the same points they want to make, but you would say them one way because it makes sense to you and you know how you're going to prove it or how you're going to back it up. But somebody else with a different starting point can make similar points, but they've got different proof. So they would organize things in a different order. So the last point then is, so let's say the question is, the essay is, what is life for? So an example. You get a sheet of paper and you write life in the middle and draw a circle around it. And you're going to give yourself 60 seconds to figure out what you might say about life. So you could pause the video and try it for yourself right now. Give yourself 60 seconds. If not, so I'm saying, okay, what is life? And some people say life is a school. So I write down school on the piece of paper. And I'm going to consider it tomorrow. Some people say that life is just chemical reactions. You know, this chemical interacted with that chemical and something was produced. And life is really just an accident. It's all random. So I write down chemical reaction. And that gives me something else to think about tomorrow. Then I look at the word life, L-I-F-E. You drop the first and the last letter and you've got if in the middle. So maybe life is all about possibilities and consequences. If you do this, that's going to happen. Do you want that? In which case, do this or don't do that. So I've got 4 words now. I've got school, chemical reaction, and if. And then I look and notice that if you drop the F in the word life, you've got lie. So I write down L-I-E. So that gives me a 4th possibility. Maybe life is about recognizing the truth from lies. There's a line in Bob Dylan. Though the rules of the road have been lodged, it's people's games you've got to dodge. So people lie, people spin a tale. But can we distinguish what's really going on from what appears to be going on? So that's my work for the day. 1 minute, I've got 5 words. School, chemical reaction, if and lie. Then tomorrow, I would take each point and I would write school on a piece of paper and think, what is it? Should I say, I've only got 1 point that I'm going to make in this essay about what life is for, what life is. So can life be like a school? Think about school, we've got a schedule, we've got a principal, we've got teachers, we've got homework, we've got the weekend off. So you think about how life can be likened to a school. And that could turn into quite a good little essay. So we're in life, we're in school, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to become top of the class or get good marks? In which case we're going to have to do the work and pay attention and not slack off all the time. Are we going to get detention? How are we going to enjoy recess time? So you could write a good little essay about life is like a school. Or maybe go to if. Life can be characterized as if. If we do this, that's going to happen. So life is about learning to choose wisely. So life is about developing wisdom or seeing how one thing leads to another. And there are connections between people, between conditions, between circumstances. And when we can understand the correct connection, it gives us some measure of control over what happens in life. And that could be turned into a little essay as well. So to sum up, you can create, you can be creative, and you can critique. Don't do them at the same time. Let time pass. So be creative first. Figure out what you, in writing the essay, figure out what you might say. Leave it. Look at the individual points and decide for yourself what you're going to say, how you're going to prove it, how you're going to back it up, and the best order in which to present the information. You're getting a clear picture in your mind so that when you describe what's in your head, what's in your mind, you've thought it through, you've figured it out, you're going to write a much better essay. I think that's it. If there's anything obvious that I've forgotten, I'll put up a short little 3rd video. Otherwise, if you have comments, put them down below. Okay, bye-bye.